What are you laughing about my hat for?
Please make the hat the cover photo for this podcast.
No way.
Yeah.
This is my everyday around Anchorage hat.
Get yourself in a bathroom mirror, take a picture, take a selfie, or take a standing photo of you in a bathroom mirror and make that the cover for this podcast.
Clothes on, right?
Please.
Well, you said wearing the hat. Do you want me to be wearing just the hat?
We don't want to get kicked off anything, okay?
My bad. Not that. This is not that kind of podcast. Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well,
so, what's new, Kyle?
I spent 45 minutes shoveling my driveway today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
tundra?
What?
You're up in the frozen tundra?
Yeah, there was so much snow on the ground. The bottom of Emily's car was scraping the fresh powder we got, so I had to. And then today was probably the roughest day driving in Anchorage. Like I almost got a couple accidents today, spinning all around and sliding. I do. So I was leaving work, and I was driving home a different way because Thursdays, I get off a little earlier, and this truck in front of me was driving, and he went all of a sudden to the middle lane, and I was like, oh, he must be turning left. So I started to speed up, and I looked up, and there was a freaking cow moose in the middle of my lane. So I slammed on my brakes and went, and I just kept sliding, and I slid for probably 10 feet, and I stopped about a car's length away from this moose, and she walked across the road.
Oh, that was just going to be my question. I was like, man, it's all snowy and frozen up there. And I was like, have you had any run-ins with moose lately?
No, that was the first one I've had in a while.
What about you seen the moose and her calf lately? The cow and her calf?
No, I think that calf got eaten. There was some person on the Anchorage Bear Tracker, a Facebook group, posted a video in my neighborhood of a brown bear catching and killing a calf moose on their like Ring doorbell or whatever in the yard in our neighborhood.
That's crazy. Imagine just like getting a notification and you're like hoping it's an Amazon package, and instead it's a grizzly bear running off with a calf moose. You're just like, oh, all right.
I heard it was pretty gruesome because you can like hear this calf being just like torn apart while it was still alive.
Oh, I mean, you listen to like deer cry after you shoot them or something. That's like one of the most brutal things.
Have you ever heard a bear moan when it dies?
Yeah, the cry, or it's like well, I haven't personally heard it, but I've watched like videos of it, and my uncles and stuff have told me about it. It's pretty gnarly.
It's sad, bro.
So there's this is kind of like going off on a side road here, but there's this video of like a big boar grizzly bear like hopping into a cave of like two black bear cubs and just like murdering them alive. And then you can't see them like getting torn apart, but you can hear them. And it's like, and the guy records it for like 8 to 10 minutes. And you're just watching this. You don't even, he's like videotaping the tree line, and you just hear like screaming.
That's horrifying.
It's terrible, but I think in some way it's like we got to remember it's a circle of life in some sort.
Yeah, I mean, look at Washington right now and their spring bear.
Mm-hmm.
That is shitty.
Yeah, you could say that.
That sucks because, I mean, getting rid of spring bear, I feel like that's a big deal. The worst thing is it's a foot in the door for people to just cancel hunting outright in Washington. I mean,
yeah,
you have so much influence from people who don't hunt or even do anything or hunt or fish or anything like that.
Yeah,
they don't. That Washington could be in danger of having more than just spring bear hunting. Spring bear hunting, I mean, I can definitely see, like in your instance, you're talking about excuse me, a grizzly bear killing black bear cubs, but that happens with boar black bears and black bear cubs because they kill those cubs to get the sow and heat so that he can breed that sow and pass on his genes. Um, I can totally see that this could make things a little worse. In that case, you're going to have a lot of um, you're just going to have a lot more bears,
Yeah.
and it's like that's a horrible way to go. I'd much rather harvest a boar black bear than have him kill a bunch of um, baby black bears. Like that's even more gruesome, I think, than hunting in general. I feel like if people who were against hunting bears knew what male bears did to not only cubs but deer and elk and everything else, I think it'd be way different.
Yeah, like during calving season. I mean, that's like, I mean, imagine coming into the new world shaken, and now there's going to be, so this is kind of the way I look at it, right? And this is going down. This is all kind of biased, personal opinion. Um, but I think that we've, as people, have. I mean, if you look at it, what is like the percentage we've killed? Like, I want to say it's like 90% of what was living. It might have not have been humans, but like 90% of what once was here is gone. And I think that uh, humans, our ancestrals um, of our past, have eliminated things that they didn't find like worthy in some way. So now we're stuck on a pyramid food chain of what we defined as food, um, and then it has a little bit of predate. I can't say it. What is it? Predation.
Predation.
Predation. Thank you. In it to keep a balance and try to keep everything healthy. And so what happens is, as much as like we wish we could just, you could let it go and everything would balance itself out. I think at some extent is that's not capable of doing that anymore because we're so far away from the original food chain. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, we've affected populations so much of both just taking game animals in Washington. We've affected the population and the habits of both ungulates, your deer and your elk,
Yep.
and predators like bears and cougars that they can't balance themselves out. Where you're either going to have too many predators and not enough ungulates, or vice versa, and too much of anything is not good. And that's a big thing. Is like you want to promote having more of one species, excuse me, or the other.
Yeah.
If you have too many of that species, then they're going to start getting sick. They're going to start dying. Look at the EHD and stuff in
Mm-hmm.
northeastern Washington. Not to say that that was necessarily connected to predators. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. There are a shit ton of whitetails up there, and especially with the drought we had this year, where we had so little water, um, that a lot of these animals are going and they're drinking out of the same water sources, contracting the same thing, and then they were dying, going to water sources, passing it on.
Yeah.
These are the type of things that kick in when you have environmental factors and large populations, is because now they're getting sick and dying off, and only the strongest survive. So, I mean, that's like a natural balance, but so much of that is influenced by humans now that something has to be done to manage populations. And in this case, it's bears.
Yeah. Um, I mean, you kind of bring up it's like a gateway into the rest of our hunting and you could almost go all the way to our outdoor industry in some sense.
Yeah.
If you've been, I don't know if you've been following, but like our fellow state, Oregon, they actually got something enough signatures to push onto the ballot for like to stop all hunting.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Was that last year?
It was recently. I don't have a time or kind of a quote on that, and but from my understanding is, I mean, there was a few articles. I read one from, I believe it was Meteors, but yeah, I mean, you start giving these people on all, not just one or the other, but on all platforms, an inch. Eventually, it could be a mile. So I think that hunting is a dying breed in some ways, you know.
For sure. It definitely is. And if we as sportsmen and women don't do something to combat that, combat's the right word, then we're going to lose it entirely. We
Yeah.
spring bears. I believe if I read everything right, one of the arguments was that we're hunting bears during their rut. Where if that was one of their main factors, again, I'm pretty sure that's what I heard or what I read. If that's one of the main factors, then what about our deer and our elk seasons? Like you hunt elk in September, that's the elk rut. One of the reasons it's I wouldn't say easier to hunt an elk, but one of the ways that you can be successful as hunting is because you are hunting a rutting bull elk who has one thing on his mind.
Yeah.
Same thing for late season deer hunting. You're literally hunting bucks in the rut, looking for does who are really dumb. I watched my dad shoot a buck one time. He got drawn for a late season tag with a rifle, and this buck literally was following a doe, and the doe ran off, and he just stared at us, stared at us. He stared at us so long, my dad was ready to turn broadside, and he finally just shot him straight on in the chest because he wouldn't turn because he was so rutted up.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're gonna take bear hunting away because it's the
I
rut, it's gonna happen to everything else, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and in some sense, it's bear hunting is not hand over fist easy. Like, I mean, they're amazing creatures. And just to put this out there so people know, me and Kyle have so much respect for these animals. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
getting out, me and Kyle both have trail cam footage of, I have a trail cam footage of a bear just tearing one of my trail cams apart. And, I think most people would be like, oh man, I'm losing my trail cam. But in some sense, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This bear sniffed out some type of scent on my trail cam and tore it up. I mean, and I got video of it.
That's
Um,
possible.
yeah. So, but yeah, I think in every sense we need some level of balance. Or I'm not a biologist. And I'm not a politician. I'm just a person that really likes to do hunting and fishing. And I think, I'm not speaking for Kyle, but I think Kyle feels the same way on a lot of those topics. And yeah, it's rough to see.
It is. And bear hunting. No, I've never spring bear hunted,
Hmm.
but bear hunting is my favorite. It's my favorite thing to hunt in Washington. Honestly, I've shot 3 bears in Washington, and the first 2 were accidents. I mean, I always carried a bear tag because you never know if you're going to see one, and I happened to see 2, and I think they were back to back years. I was hunting archery season in September, and I shot one in Northeast Washington and one in Central Washington, and then last year was the first year I'd ever actually like targeted bears because I really wanted to shoot another bear, and they're a totally different way to target predators. It's totally different than deer elk hunting.
Yeah.
It's something entirely different, and I have so much respect for them and where they live and their routines and how curious they are. They're always moving. They're always checking things out. The way they eat is so cool to watch. The way they interact, and I don't know. I have a huge respect for predators. They're like us, man. They're looking for something, their next meal, their next thing to eat, and they're cruising country. And there's a reason there's not as many predators as you are, say, ungulates. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're just so cool, and their numbers do need to be managed because last year, where I shot my bear, that same week we saw one, two, I think we saw like 5 bears in that canyon or something, in that one canyon. Um, and I shot my bear like I shot my bear standing on a main trail, a half mile from the parking lot. So it's like they're there, they're around people. I talked to multiple people on that trail, um, who had seen bears or like running or they're hiking, the bears would literally jump up right off the side of the trail and take off. Uh, so like in some instances, it's not only managing populations, it's also controlling, like it's a safety issue, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's it. I mean, you got to do some sense of population control, because I mean, here's like another instance as you look at kind of the situations in Montana on their grizzly bears. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they're moving outside of Yellowstone now, and now it seems like every year that we go on and we keep letting these things populate. Um, I mean, it just seems like more and more either people in the fishing industry or people just enjoying the outdoors, or I mean, just people out enjoying the river. You know, they're just getting attacked by these bears, and it's not on. I wouldn't say it's the bear's fault, and I wouldn't say it's the person's fault. I just think it's just in, you know, the numbers are getting so far and far out that they're going to start. They need to go somewhere, and that's, you know, if that makes sense. So
No, for sure. There's just so many G bears now in the lower 48, and that you just can't get them. The hard part, I think, is getting them delisted. Like, look at the wolves. It took.
yeah,
I remember I was in like high school, or excuse me, junior high, like or middle school, seventh grade, and I was like reporting on wolves and like them helping the ecosystems in Yellowstone, and everything was just coming out, you know, about wolves starting to move their way back in. And that was, you know, 10 or so years ago, 15 years ago. And now we're here where we're at. And in that time it took to get them delisted to where you could hunt them, they just, their numbers exploded. And now we have them in Washington. Um, and they're not huntable in Washington. And I know wolves are a really controversial topic. Keaton and I have talked about this off the podcast about how much we want to breach the subject, but it's just the fact that getting things to where we can manage them is really tough. And I can especially see it in wolves because that's a dog, right? And a
yeah,
dog, people, a lot of people have dogs or have friends that have dogs or been in contact with dogs. Everybody loves dogs. And to think about trying to um, manage populations of wild dogs by hunting them, I think that messes with a lot of people. I think people have a hard time um, understanding that and accepting that. And I think it's the same way with bears. Everybody thinks of Yogi and Bear, and everybody thinks of teddy bears, and they see these beautiful, fluffy bears. You know, like Emily, for example. Emily's all about bears. She loves bears. She thinks they're really, really cute. They're really cuddly looking. But right, literally, as I'm speaking right now, she's literally sitting on the couch, leaning up against one of my bear hides from one of the bears I shot. Like, she understands. She thinks they're cool, but she also understands that their populations need to be controlled.
oh, my favorite animal growing up has always been like grizzly bears, because it was just so amazing to me to see like videos of these you know, brown bears, grizzly bears, you know, jumping in rivers
Yeah.
and catching fish, you know, swimming after catching fish. And it's like, man, that's hard to do, especially like, you know, growing up fishing. You're like, man, it's hard to catch them on like gear and stuff, let alone, or even try to like, you reach for one, they know you're there and they take off and they spook. And these bears make it look like it's just an everyday thing for them. And so
Mhm.
I just like growing up and watching that, I just think they're amazing, and how big and strong and how fast of a unit they are. Um, it's just, there's something else. So
For sure. I don't remember. I don't know how we got started on the bear topic, but
yeah,
we're here now.
we're here. I think it's been we got, you kind of brought up spring bear. So I I think there's a lot of emotions and a lot of topics in our hunting and fishing. And I think a lot of people feel different ways about everything. But at the end of the day, we got to look at what our scientists and biologists are seeing, what people, you know, hunters. I think that's one thing that we as hunters get left out in the consideration. I mean, hunters and fishermen, we're out there most of the year and we're going to see a lot of stuff. You know, I know guys that spend hours and hours in certain units, certain rivers, and they can almost call out, like, you come around the corner, you can almost guarantee where, a buck's going to be, or like one thing for me is I always point out the bighorn sheep. I found them in the fall, and almost like out of 10 times, I probably had them there 8 times. And I
Yep.
could be like, as we come around this corner, if you look to the right and at this rock, you'll see, and they're just like standing there,
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's just something, food for thought, you know.
for sure. And if people really want to do some stuff, I
Yeah.
failed on this. I should have commented, even though I'm not a Washington resident. I was a Washington resident. I should have commented when that comment session was open so that I could have a say, like, hey, we shouldn't get rid of bear season, and this is why. And I feel like as sportsmen and women, we're really passionate about it, but in a lot of ways, um, everybody, including myself, especially myself, someone who enjoys hunting bears, should be doing more to promote keeping this around, as opposed to saying, somebody else will take care of it, or it's not really going to go away. Because you open your eyes right now, you look at it, as of now, spring bear season 2022 in Washington State canceled. So that's what happens when we don't get together, use facts, and actually promote our culture, our lifestyle to keep going.
One last thing, and then I think we should continue on. But I think that I think it was kind of wrong for them to get a tie vote, and instead of continuing it, they put a pause to it. And that's personal opinion. But I think that if people, we as sportsmen, we put our money towards tags. I know a lot of people put in a lot of money to get that opportunity, which not only should go towards conservation and a lot of other things for bears, for a lot of animals, and fisheries. And yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. Well, welcome to another episode of the Young Guys podcast. um, Keaton and I are just sitting down tonight, just bullshitting. I mean, this is what Keaton and I do a lot of nights anyway. And we kind of planned tonight. We didn't have a guest for you guys, and we kind of planned that all of these things I've had on my mind, and I'm sure a lot of things Keaton's had on his mind, and some of the topics we've already discussed, like we're saving a lot of these to go really more in depth on the podcast, because Keaton and I are going to have these conversations anyway. So we're like, why not record it? Because we know you guys are going to think the same thing, and you want to hear about the same things.
And I hope on our side, when we're discussing, we can almost all bathe in our frustrations together. So
That's a really weird way to put it.
oh yeah, getting bathing. No. Well, you know what I mean. Not getting weird, but
I
just
got
kind
pretty
of
weird.
that got pretty weird. All five listeners are like, I want to bathe in that.
Oh my gosh.
No. Okay, we're going down a dark road. Anyways, back to the topic though. We're just hoping that you can, you feel the way we feel, and maybe you don't feel the way we feel. We're not telling you how to feel, but just to know that you're not on these topics alone. So,
Yep, for sure. Speaking of listeners, we released our episode today, episode 5, with Mark Stoidel, talking about fly fishing and filming, and it was posted online on a Facebook group, posted on our social media, shared on Mark's social media, and we are super pumped that we have received our first ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, which is super awesome. This is validating. It feels validating to me, Keaton. Does it feel validating to you?
feels validating. It feels great. It feels like we're not just speaking into microphones every couple, every week. So,
For
feels
sure.
great.
Did you see that we not only got a review, but we also got 3 ratings?
3 ratings. Yep. That's awesome.
We have, as of now, we have 3 5-star ratings. Appreciate that, guys.
Mm-hmm.
And our one review says, great podcast. For anybody into fly fishing, this is a great podcast. For those that are looking to get into the business of fly fishing, this is even a better podcast. And this was by Sparse Gray Hackle. Again, this is on our Apple podcast. So super stoked that you guys are listening, you're taking time to review. Let us know that you're enjoying the podcast, leaving us a rating. Again, it helps us out, lets us know that we're bringing you guys stuff that you want to hear. And I'm happy out of all of that. What was most validating to me and made me the happiest was to see that person come and said, if you're looking to get into the business, this is an even better podcast. And I think that's super cool that we, our conversations and the people we've already interviewed talking about guiding can help other people get into possibly guiding or working at a fly shop or doing something in the outdoor industry. I think that's super cool how people are digging it already.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna start turning the page here, Kyle, because I got a topic I wanted to talk about.
All right.
I got two actually. These could tie into each other.
Yeah.
So one, this could be a lighter topic, or it could be a dark topic on depending on where we go with it. But let's just send it. All right. So my first question, and I want to hear what you think about this, is do you think scouting a river, like a seasonal river before it opens, is beneficial or not beneficial?
Scouting as in
like you know how rivers change and stuff. Do you think it's beneficial to go spend your time, I'm thinking like more of like a Natchez size river or something like that. Maybe a big flood happens. Do you think it's beneficial to go and take your time before the season opens and try to find new spots, or do you think you should just go for it?
I never thought about it that way. Never considered doing that.
Yeah.
I could see where it'd be a good thing. I mean, I know I go if I haven't, say, on some rivers, I haven't, I'm just going to throw Rocky Ford under the bus because everybody knows about Rocky Ford.
Yeah.
If I'm going to guide a trip out at Rocky Ford and I haven't personally fished Rocky Ford in a while, I'm going to go fish it the week or a couple days ahead of time to see what they're biting on. I mean, I have a pretty good general idea of what they're going to bite, but I want to go make sure I got the right size, the right color, all that, to make sure that my clients have a good trip. So yeah, I can definitely see where scouting can be beneficial. Even if you're not fishing, you're going and you're ready to take your clients to a spot. It's opening day. They've had you booked since Christmas time or something, and your river opens in like May or June or something.
Yeah.
And they want to go hit opening day, and you're like, all right, we're going to go to my favorite hole. We're going to get under this awesome hatch, and you get there, and a flood this year literally filled your hole with gravel. I've had it happen on some of the rivers I've guided. It's like, where did my hole go? So I think if you were to go out ahead of time, scout it out, have a plan, how you're going to access it, where can you access it, what are you going to fish, maybe flip some rocks while you're there. You can't fish, but you can see, oh, that's what they're eating, or oh, maybe there's a blooming olive flying around.
Yep.
I think scouting is an excellent idea.
I was just thinking about this the other day, and I was like, I wonder what, like, if anyone else does it, because there's a few rivers and creeks that I like to fish, and it's changing like all the time. You get a good snow melt, or I mean, this fall we got a giant rainstorm down here that raised our rivers like way up. So I'm just expecting change from, even if it's minor, might not be as big as like some of our floods in the past, but I think going out and taking your time and really evaluating, that way you can spend less time on the amount because like if you get a 3-month season, right, I don't want to be spending my first 2 weeks trying to find the spots that I want to fish. I want to be like, I have looked at this spot, I've looked at this spot, and I've looked at this spot, and I'm going to hit this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I'm going to get out and fish and figure it out, instead of being like, driving, 40 miles of a river, hopping out here and there and being like, maybe I shouldn't be fishing here. So I just wanted to know your take on that. I was kind of interested, and um, yeah. Now let's go to another. Here's my other question. Um, what is urban fisheries like in Anchorage, Alaska?
That's a great question. I don't know. I haven't. I have personally have not done much urban fishing yet in Anchorage because most of my stuff was on the Parks Highway, and I was guiding outside of Anchorage, and never, whenever I was home, I was always like, basically doing chores, my honey-do list.
Yeah.
When I,
Have you heard, like, have you talked to anyone at like local shops, or like have you heard about it, or even uh, like listen to like maybe a podcast or something about it, or like do you have any?
I have this is a guy that I work with at Heather's Choice who does a lot of stuff in town.
Yeah.
And I've heard a little bit about it. And there are places pretty close to Anchorage where it can be very popular for salmon fishing and trout fishing, and it's definitely there. I mean, I drive over on my way to work every day. I drive over a river that has salmon and trout in it. That it's you literally drive over the top of it of some of the most busiest roads in Anchorage. Or some places, there are literally restaurants where the deck is like right on the side of the river.
Yeah.
Um, under that goes like it goes right through the middle of town. So it's definitely there. You can definitely access it within minutes and walk up or down river along trails and fish it that way. There's also lakes. I mean, we have some lakes in some of these parks that you can fish. You can walk out and fish it when there's no ice on it, or like right now, you can go ice fish on these lakes, and they're in the middle of town. They're in some of these parks. Um, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. I don't know it yet.
Yeah, I'm excited. I just was curious. Um, I mean, where I grew up, it's a little different than you, and I have a lot of urban fisheries around, and I'm like weirdly fascinated by urban fisheries and the effects that go into them. And I was just wondering, on what scale does Anchorage have for urban fisheries? Since like the only part in Alaska I've been to is Ketchikan, and it's just like a little, it's a decent sized town, but um, compared to like some of the towns we have down here, it's moderately small.
No, definitely. Anchorage is big enough to have urban fisheries, and they're there. I don't know them, but I'm definitely gonna spend more time learning them next year because they're not that far from my house. I wish I would have checked out a little more. And I know they got fish in them. I know that we have one of the biggest northernmost brown bear populations right here in Anchorage on one of these creeks. Guy I work with says there's this one creek that he doesn't fish at a certain point north,
Mhm.
um, or excuse me, a certain part like the west or like further into the mountains on
Mhm.
this creek away from Anchorage because there's so many bears. He sees bears every single time and doesn't go there by himself anymore.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So um yeah. So I wish I knew more, and I will. Just not currently.
Yeah, that's well. I'm excited to hear. It's gonna be. I'm sure that you're itching to get out and do some fishing for yourself.
For sure. And especially after my trip to Boise, I really wish I'd packed a fly rod during Thanksgiving break.
Yeah.
Just thinking about that, and I went through a bunch of my nymphs the other day I had from the lower 48, and going through it and looking at all my bugs. Like, dude, I want to get back out there and talking to um, Mark and watching his videos and watching some of my other favorite filmmakers on YouTube. It's like, dude, I gotta get back out there. Can't wait to fish.
Yeah.
But we could have like 3 feet of snow on the ground right now. It's a little hard to fly fish right now with 3 feet of snow.
I could believe that.
Yeah. So
We're at Christmas time, talking about some good holiday gifts, and I was talking that not everyone needs $1,000 fly rod. What they could use is like a lot of the little things, like a dozen flies, or some of the, like indicators, or fly box, or it's a lot of the little stuff that we lose, or as a guide or as an angler, just an everyday angler, that adds up, that like I lose indicators more than I should, and it's just nice to have a bunch of them there. So
Dude, I think guiding in Washington, I might have lost like 4 indicators in 3.5, 4 years.
yeah.
As soon as I moved to Alaska, I probably lost like 4 dozen indicators this year. Airlocks, like nice indicators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, just so everyone knows, it's not my clients losing the airlock systems. I'm just risking it for the biscuit, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's a nice hole under that branch, and I just like try to slap it in, just give it a nice like sidearm cast, and next thing I know, I've hooked an oak tree, and there goes everything. So
Been there, done that. One thing that related to indicators that I found this year is that color matters in indicators. Have you ever considered the color of your indicators, Keaton?
mm, I haven't had the privilege to see that yet. I've heard like you, and I've heard Keegan and some other guides talk about it. They're like, yeah, we're fishing the exact same thing, exact same depth. And one has an orange indicator on, the other has a pink indicator on. And the guy with the orange indicator is just slaying fish. The guy with the pink indicator isn't. And I switch to an orange airlock, and boom, they're both slaying fish.
Well, it's not. Yeah, I. It's not so much orange versus pink. I like orange and pink. When I
Yeah.
guide on the Yakima, I always fished orange and pink because that's what people can see. Up in Alaska, what I learned from my head guide, and I saw this happen fishing for steelhead, is a white colored indicator, which is hard to see
Yeah.
because it blends in with the foam and the glare and stuff. But it also blends in with the foam and the glare and stuff. So it blends in more to the fish. I was fishing on one of the best steelhead rivers in the state of Alaska, and it was crystal clear water. And I was fishing at the mouth, and the head guide and I were fishing together. He was spotting from this log, and the steelhead started swimming up the river. And I saw it, so I ran ahead of it and I intercepted it, flopped out my bead rig, and I had a big pink indicator on. And that fish, I literally watched that fish swim towards my bead, look up, see my indicator, and pew, haul ass past it because he saw my pink indicator. Something might have been different if I'd fished a different color indicator. And then
Yeah.
from that moment on, I've only fished white indicators this year, and I think it really helps. I really think it does on how those fish perceive
Yeah.
offering them. Because if every time I got hooked in the mouth and I looked up and there was a pink or an orange thing there, I think after a while I would stop eating it. But if you look up and it's like it kind of blends in, a white indicator, they're not. I think they have a harder time putting two and two together, and it just looks more natural.
Well, you put it in the phone line. I mean, just think about like, you throw anything with like a white parachute or anything,
Mm-hmm.
like a white indicator, and you put it in that phone line. I sometimes I'm like, I'm trying to watch my clients, dry flies with the white parachute. I'm like, uh, I think a fish just came up. I'd set, and sometimes they do hook up one fish, and then other times I'm like, just reset, and I'm not going to tell them, but I'm doing that so I can watch for their fly land, so I can see where things are at again. That
That's
makes
fun.
sense. Yeah, but
Every
I think if there's anyone from Airlock listening, you guys need to make a white indicator, but put like a little orange dot on top or something, so we can
There you
see,
go.
so you can see it on top, but the rest is all white.
That'd be cool. I kind of camouflaged mine this year. I had white ones, and then I also wrote my initials on it because in our guide barn every day we had we didn't use the same rods every day, so somebody else might grab your rod. And so I would write my initials on indicators so that if we left the rods strung up, we knows who either to give the indicators back to, or that I could take them and say, no, this was my indicator. I'm not taking your indicators. And in a
Yeah,
way, I think it kind of helps camouflage it because you're writing initials on both sides of an indicator, and it kind of breaks up that white even more.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be interesting.
I should do it next year and like have one client fish a certain color indicator and one
Yeah.
client fish another color and see what the difference is.
You should almost, as nerdy as it sounds, you should tally it and see like maybe if you're just fun fishing, like go out and see like on your day, fish just try to keep like the fly the same,
Uh-huh.
change the different indicators and see if it has and like any effect.
That would be cool.
Kyle the scientist is going to come at you with some good info about urban fisheries and about indicator color.
There you go.
Stay tuned, 2022.
Kyle Wilkinson for Scientist 2020.
Oh, we'd all be in trouble.
What else do you think people should get for Christmas for stocking stuffers or
Um, yeah, so I mean, I really elaborated on like indicators, split shot fly boxes. Um, I think an assortment of flies. But like if you're just looking for, it depends on the type of fisherman in your life. I think there's really great, like if you're doing winter fishing, there's great clothing out there. Technology's really come a long way, and there's like clothing that where like your pits and your hot spots, it'll keep it neutral temperature, but like the rest of your body nice and warm. That's a big thing for me is I get really hot and like really sweaty, especially when you're hiking around in rivers or going up and down hills. You get really warm. So finding a nice like underlayer to keep me warm but not too warm is a great gift. Apparel, hats. You don't have, like I said, you don't have to get that person, that fly fisherman or fly fisher woman in your life, $1,000, sage or an Orvis rod. You can get them a lot of little things that, and me personally, I think it would go a long way. So, what about you? What do you think, Kyle?
well, I totally agree. I mean, I'm getting a new rod for Christmas. I want a new rod for Christmas, but it's not $1,000 rod.
Yeah.
Um, but that's also because I have I have a quiver of rods, but there's a section of that quiver that is called Alaska that isn't filled yet,
Mm-hmm.
just because of how we fish up here is so much different. It requires a little bit of a stiffer action rod, and this kind of leading in transitioning into the next part of the conversation that Keaton and I want to talk about. The rod that I'm looking at right now is called the Redington Predator. It is it's a fast action rod. It's a little bit stiffer. And as a 9.5 foot 6 weight, it's an extra 6 inches, which adds for a little bit more control, gives you a little bit easier to mend, a little bit, another extra 6 inches to fight fish. It also has a fighting butt as a 6 weight integrated into the rod, whereas most of the time I feel like you don't start getting a fighting butt until you get like a 7 or an 8 weight.
Yeah.
This Redington Predator is specifically made for targeting harder fighting bigger fish.
Mm-hmm.
And up here in Alaska, generally your trout are bigger and they're going to fight pretty hard. And you're fishing bead rigs with sometimes up to like 2 or 3 split shot, a big bobber, or you're slapping a bobber with like a dolly llama and 2 split shots. So, I mean, you need a stiff rod just to cast. And I've even had clients catch pinks and silvers and chums on this 9.5 foot 6 weight Redington Predator. So that's the rod that I really want. I really like it. I have other rods. I've guided with other rods, various brands, sizes, weights, and all around I found this rod that I really, really like. And so that's what I'd like to get. I'm getting for Christmas.
Yeah.
So I can kind of build up my quiver and fill this niche that it's not quite filled for me yet. I love my Orvis Clearwaters. I have 2 6 weights, 2 5 weights that I guided with, and the 6 weights did okay for me up here. But initially at the beginning of the season, when I was fishing mouths of creeks where these trout were staging before they went up the river after breakup, I could not, my rod was not stiff enough. Part of that was probably my line because I had just regular clear water line. Really didn't have a powerful head or anything, but I couldn't back cast and I was having to roll cast and I couldn't get my flies out far enough just because I didn't have enough backbone. I didn't have a heavy enough taper. Whereas breaking out a heavier rod, I had to break out my 8-weight Recon with, I think I have a Power Pro Pro line on it from Orvis. And I was able to roll cast a big bead rig with an indicator and get out to where I need it to be.
Yeah.
So I just needed a heavier rod and I needed a faster rod with a heavier head. So I think that all around this new rod is going to be really great in my arsenal. I'm going to want to use my 6-weight more because I didn't hardly ever use my 6-weights this year. I almost exclusively use my 8-weight, which is almost a little too overkill for some of the trout that we were catching.
Yeah.
So if you are going to buy, I think in my instance, like if you are going to get somebody a rod or get somebody gear, um, make sure I mean, it's obviously it's a thought that counts, but also make sure that you're getting them something that they want or need or can use. Like, no offense against, say, Emily goes out, she knows better than to go to the fly tying section and buy me something off the rack because she could buy me some size 28 bead for nymphs.
Yeah.
Think that she got me the right thing and it wasn't. And so she knows that things are specific, right? And so if you're going to get something super specific for somebody, make sure that you know exactly what it is that they want or what it is that they need so you can get them that exact thing. Or just buy them a gift card to your local fly shop or something because then they can get exactly what they need.
Gift card, you can't go wrong with gift cards.
I do. If I could just get a gift card for everything, I'd be totally happy with that.
So if you're looking to buy your partner or your kid a fly rod, I think the two most important things is making sure you find the weight for the type of fishing they're doing, and the weight is like a caliber to a gun. I mean, you're not going to go elk hunting with a 22, so you don't want to go buy a 4-weight for that person that goes tarpon fishing in your life. You know what I mean? So just kind of figure out if you're like, if you can just find out what kind of fishing they do, you go to the fly shop, say, hey, I'm looking for this price range, and my whoever I'm buying this for likes to fish for trout, let's say. I think that and pairing your rod with the right line is a huge part to your success. Because if you, like, I've heard of stories of people buying fast action rods and then not buying the right size line, or buying a line that may not be suitable for that rod, and they're just not having a great experience. And it's not because the rod's performance is poor, it's because they didn't make a good line pairing to that rod. So that's just my 2 cents. Keaton's 2 cents of the day. Just make sure you get a good pairing with your rod and fly line. Back to you, Kyle.
For sure. When I first started fishing two-handed rods, I had a switch rod that my dad bought me. It was a Cabela's model, and he went to our local Cabela's and they outfitted him with a rod and reel, and it was an absolute piece of shit to cast. And I just could not get down the roll cat or tossing that thing two-handed, whatever. And then last year, I fished with my head guide before the guide season started. We were fishing, and he had a 7-weight that was perfectly paired up with everything, and it cast like a dream. And I'm like, one, I have fished a lot more, so I understand how to do it more, and I've got a good feel for it. But I also think I had just a rod and a line that was not matched up correctly. I don't think the guy really set my dad up, and my dad didn't know and what he was doing. He's never done a lot of two-handed fishing, and he even has a hard time casting with his setup. And I think it's just because we have the wrong setup. So when Keaton, excuse me, when Keaton set me up, I was moving to Alaska. My first trip I was going to go on once I moved up here was a steelhead trip, and I didn't have a two-handed, excuse me, two-handed fly rod. And I wanted something to swing with and possibly nymph with. So Keaton and I went back and forth on what type of rod I wanted, which was a switch rod. And I think I got an 8 weight because I wanted to catch steelhead on it, but I also wanted to maybe use it for Chinook and pinks and silvers and whatnot. So um, we went back and forth about the rod, found the rod I wanted, and then Keaton was like, all right, what grain weight of like what head and what grain weight is going to match with this rod? And I had to go look through the specs. And because Keaton worked with me through what rod I wanted, and then finding what shooting line it needed, and then what size head it could have, both for Scandi and Skagit, I was then able to get this rod that freaking casts like a dream and makes just way more sense because everything is paired. The rod is flexing in a certain way that the line works with, or vice versa, and it allows me to lay my casts out there where I want them and how I want them, versus trying to force something um, that just can't. Trying to force something that isn't working is just your casts are going to be shit. That makes sense. So pairing your line to the rod, or like what I was talking about earlier, I couldn't roll cast far enough out because I had a medium action rod and a medium action line, and it just wasn't loading up. The rod couldn't load enough, and the line wasn't fast and tapered and had such a shooting head that it wouldn't go out. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important, just kind of adding on, to find that right grain window. Each rod is going to be built differently, and the specs are going to be different. Little tip from like putting together spey rods and stuff. At first, it's a really daunting task, especially if you're just getting into it. But if you're looking, you're going to order it offline, and you're like, okay, I'm going to get this rod. Make sure that you have a large enough arbor to fit all of the things that you need on a spey. You're going to have backing, running line, heads, and, even sink tips. So just making sure that that reel's big enough to hold all that. And then you can look up Rio spey recommendations and they usually update it. Like they have the 2020 out, and it has most of the new rods. Pretty much all your common rods are on there. Scroll down and it'll tell you the grain window. You don't want to exceed that grain window, and you definitely don't want to go under that grain window. You're trying to, if you're a new caster, I like to go towards the front of the window, like more to the heavier side. And that's just, I'm not a spey wizard or anything. I'm just an average guy that put it together enough. And I found it when I first started doing casting, that a heavier head definitely benefited me.
for sure. So yeah. Moral of the story is pair the right line to the rod. Your reel is the least you should spend the least amount of money on your reel if it comes down to it. Because I mean, if you're catching like big kings, or you're fishing for a tarpon or permit or bonefish or carp, you want to have something with a decent drag and a decent arbor, because they are going to probably take you to your backing or put on a good fight and take you to your reel. But honestly, most of the time for trout fishing and most of the stuff you're going to do, you're going to be able to strip it in and maybe use your reel, but your reel is the absolute last thing you need to worry about.
Yeah, as a trout fisherman, I would, if you are listening to us from like Florida, or you do tarpon fishing or some of those big game, fishing, you definitely want to go put your money towards all of it, like all around, because some of the cheaper reels have like a plastic bearing inside. And I mean, I've heard of people like hooking into bonefish on, cheap reels, and the bearing ended up melting, or a fast like a redfish or something. It's just going to eat your reel alive. So But yeah.
Exactly. So for most of the stuff you're doing in Washington, you can get away with a cheaper reel.
Yep.
But yeah, make sure everything's paired up. Go to your local fly shop if you don't know much about how to build your own, or have a buddy like Keaton so they can help you figure it out.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to add to that, and then we can keep on moving on this. But making sure if that fisherman in your life does saltwater fishing, don't buy anything without a sealed drag. Make sure, or yeah, sealed drag system, and that way salt water's not getting in there. Salt water is very corrosive, and it will eat your reels alive. So make sure to get a sealed drag, and then make sure to tell that person to wash, even though it says it's a saltwater reel, make sure to soak it, wash it, and make sure you're keeping it clean, because over time salt water is just a bitch of its own. So
For sure. Um, Salt water eats a lot of stuff, so
yeah.
definitely take care of it. I think we're gonna hit one more topic tonight. I know Keaton and I have a couple other topics that we want to hit, but we are over an hour now into this, so we don't want to keep you guys too super late. And it's 9 o'clock my time and 10 o'clock Keaton's time, so it is getting late. We've been talking, we've shared some good stuff, but we want to wrap it up on one more topic. What do you want to end up on here tonight, Keaton? What's the last thing we want to talk about that we have written down?
Let me take a look here.
I mean, these are really good, but we're gonna have a lot of opportunity to talk more about stuff into the future, just the two of us.
Yeah. I think we I think what we should talk about is, for our last topic, is what to do when you're sitting inside your Alaska house and there's there's too much snow on the ground to do anything, any sort of outdoor activity. And I kind of geared this, I'm in Washington. It's really wet and rainy here. You can still get out and go do fishing and stuff. But Kyle, what do you do to keep that cabin fever off?
Honestly, if I can stay inside right now, I will, because I don't like to drive in these kind of conditions.
Yeah.
Um, but and I had such a long, exhausting, grinding summer that I having time inside is kind of nice right now, to be totally honest. Um, but it is important to get out. So in the winter time, got snowshoeing. I haven't done any skating or skiing, whether that be Nordic skating, ice skating, Nordic skiing, cross country, downhill. I haven't done any of that. So it might be something I look into doing more. A lot of our local stores have consignment stores that can get us you can buy cheap gear. You can rent gear from places, have friends take you out. So I need to do more of that. But Emily and I do snowshoe. We snowshoed last weekend, went and checked some trail cameras. That is one thing I like to run in the wintertime is trail cameras, because I have time to go check them and manage them, and things change in the wintertime. You get a cool transition with the various types of animals and what those animals are doing, their routines. But in Alaska, it's hard on trail cameras when it's -8 degrees. So
Yeah.
something I got to kind of manage. I pulled all my cams down last week. But yeah, any kind of things you can't slow down up here. I mean, you can, if you transition along with the weather, you can keep doing things. You're just basically changing your gear, how much you layer, and how many hours you have. Right now, this morning, I think it got daylight a little after, like close to 11, and it got dark by like 4. So you don't have very many hours of daylight. So you got to
Yeah.
get most of it. Otherwise, I'm in the house recording podcasts, reading, or tying flies, thinking about next season, just whipping out bugs. I know what bugs I need now for next season based off of what I use this season. So I mean, I've got a whole box of just woolly boogers. I got a whole box of just Dalai Lamas. I got a whole box of different colored beads that I'm painting some right now and
Yeah.
stocking up, just getting ready for 4 months of summer so I can have 8 months of winter to prep again, basically.
Nice. That sounds good.
I one last thing about that too is I'm reading this book right now. I was telling Keaton, it is so I always heard about Tom Rosenbauer and his books, and I'm like, yeah, Tom Rosenbauer, he's a god in the fly fishing universe, and I just I don't know if I thought maybe his books are overrated or something, and that people were just in love with Tom because I'm in love with Tom, but I thought maybe people were just fangirling hard or something. But I was at my used bookstore and I picked up a copy, and I think that they've had new editions come out since. I'm sure they have, but this one was printed in 1993, and this was an Orvis Guide Prospecting for Trout by the author of Reading Trout Streams by Tom Rosenbauer, Fly Fishing Secrets from a Streamside Observer. I'm only 45 pages into this book, and I've had to reread some sections, and I'm sitting down. And if I get tired reading it, I will set it down and come back later because this book is so good. It makes me reflect on so many different things that I've witnessed, either fishing or guiding, and things that planning for the future and how to read water and what to look for and hatches. And right now, I'm in a section of this book talking about how the geology of a river's surroundings affects how rich that river is. So if you have a spring creek that goes through limestone, it's going to affect the water. I don't want to. I'm still trying to wrap my head around. I'm going to reread this section.
I've heard this too.
Yeah, it's like the way that the water erodes at some of these minerals, and those minerals are now dissolved into the water, and it affects the conductivity and various. It allows some plant species to grow, which allows things, crustaceans and like scuds and salbugs to grow, and those fish are going to eat better because you have a rich environment versus a really high gradient river that's going through a certain type of uh, rock that doesn't break down the minerals when they dissolve. They're not beneficial, and it totally affects the way the fish are. It's something I never thought of that this book is super cool about.
Let me add a real life one, and we can throw this out there because everyone knows about it. But like if you compare the Snoqualmie River and the Yakima River,
Mm.
um, and the size and quality of fish that you're getting out of each one, from my understanding is that you're not getting that as rich of like what Kyle's saying. It's a lot to wrap your head around, but you're not getting that geological nutrition from those rocks to cause hatches, which does actually affect your fish size. Which I thought, like when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's actually really crazy because the Snoqualmie has a bunch of fish in it, but your like maybe biggest fish is 13 inches compared to like, a place like the Yak or somewhere where there's a lot of nutrition and a lot of things hatching. And sorry to just jump in on you, but I just wanted to add like something that people can put in their mind. I thought it was really interesting. Okay, back to you.
No, I appreciate it. Or you can take it a step further and compare the Snoqualmie to Rocky Ford.
Yeah.
Rocky Ford has at its good times, it has a lot of fish, but there's a lot of big fish. And it's because you look at something like the Snoqualmie. I'm sure it blew up when that water fluctuated, right? When we got all that rain.
It's very emotional. I mean, it just changes like really quick, goes really high. So I'm sure that also has an effect on the fishery as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have a river like that that's affected by runoff. You have different gradient, different type of geology. Whereas you look at Rocky Ford, which is a spring creek, it stays in the 50s year round. It doesn't freeze over in the winter. You've got a lot of aquatic plants. It comes out of the ground. It's warm. You have a lot of big fish because they're eating a lot of scuds. They're eating a lot of little nymphs and stuff that can thrive in that habitat, thrive in that environment. And just your quality, your size, your amount, where those fish hold, why they hold there. It's just, it all depends on where that water is coming out of and what is in that water specifically. So, Prospecting for Trout, super great book. And that's just one of the many things that I've learned in the first 45 pages. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this book. because there's a lot of things that I never considered that is completely blowing my mind. So read up on Daddy Tom. He knows what he's talking about.
I think at whatever level of angling you're at, you can always improve from watching something beneficial, especially reading something beneficial, the way you look at a certain piece of water, the way what you might choose that day. I mean, there's a lot of factors that play into why fish eat certain things. So um, I agree with Kyle on that. That's good to know. And I think when you're done with that, Kyle, you need to send it to me.
You can get your own copy. This is a coveted copy.
Oh, what? That's not fair. I'll go buy the new copies.
There you go. No, I'll send this to you. It's super. I've been fly fishing for 20 years, guiding for this will be my 5th season next year. And there's things in here that I never considered or thought of. And I'm not to say that I know everything, because I don't. I'm always learning every day. But there's things in here that completely went over my head that just totally makes sense.
Wait, Kyle, I thought we brought you on this podcast because you knew everything. That was a bad joke. Set up. Boom. Okay. Anyways, continuing. So I think that's some great tips. Just get in your vise. If you're new to fly fishing or whatever, try it out. I know down here we do some local meetups with clubs. You could get involved in a club, and like go out and they're doing some in-person meeting, but things are kind of hopping around with COVID and the way things are laid out. And but that's a great way to get out and talk fishing and meet people. And then down here, and it's not an Arctic wasteland, so you can still get out and do some winter fishing. But yeah, get out there and enjoy some time, or get on the vise or get in the book. And any of those options are going to make you a better angler or an outdoorsman. So I think that was some great stuff. I think we talked about some good topics today, Kyle.
I think so.
Yeah.
Definitely think so. One thing you guys can consider too, in the winter time, is listen to this podcast. You might learn a thing or two.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we're going to be firing up the blog here pretty soon. And I know that I have a personal blog called Kyle and the Outside that I haven't done not very much with lately, that I would like to basically copy paste and edit, maybe update some of those blogs that I wrote, and throw it on our website, things that I've learned fishing some places in Washington that you guys might consider for either winter fishing or for next year, learning up on that. So stay tuned for that on our website. I'll be adding that up, especially Rocky Ford,
Yep.
my favorite winter fisheries. There's things to do. You just gotta put a couple extra layers on and break ice out of your guides and keep fishing.
Yeah. Let's end this like we normally do. Let's both do a fishing story. Let's do a personal fishing story. Let's go. You first.
So one that stands out, up here we have a bunch of pinks in the river, and the silvers start coming in when the pinks are pretty thick. And this one day I was testing out this new fly pattern with one of the other guides, and we had a day off, and we weren't catching any silvers. And I had this secret fly that a client gave me, and within the first like 5 minutes, I caught the first silver. I let my buddy borrow that fly. He caught a silver. We left that spot, went to another hole. Boom, he caught his silver, and he had his limit. And so he was waiting for me, and I snapped one off, and then I was just kind of flogging water with this fly, like just waiting to catch a silver, And you would hook into pinks at almost every cast, but if you can't see the fish eat it, you can tell if it's a pink or a silver, because the silver would just wham it and annihilate it, whereas a pink would be like, and they grab it, but they didn't commit to it. And I'd been flogging this stretch of water, and I walked upstream. I'm gonna test this out up here, Willie. and I'm standing on this bank looking down at the river, and there's this giant line of pinks within like 10 feet of the bank, and it's really deep, and there's a tree that sticks out upstream, so it kind of creates a really slow current where I can see down, and they're just stacked in there where that slow current is. And I throw my first cast out, and I swing this thing through, and these pinks are going after and eating it. I either pull it away from a pink, or I don't set the hook and just let them spit it out. Run it through a couple casts, not getting anything. One thing I noticed about these silvers is that they sit either under the pinks or just on the outside of the major schools of pinks. So on this, like my third cast, I cast out just a little bit further past where I have been, like towards the middle, past the school of pinks. And I'm halfway through my swing, and boom, this silver bullet shoots out from the bottom of these pinks. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, oh shit, that's a silver. Boom, and I set the hook because that thing had come out of the bottom of these pinks on the far side, shot through the pinks, and boom, annihilated my fly. And I was like, Willie, I go. And then he comes running up with the net and gets down there and get that thing in. And we were both limited out on silvers that day. Super cool. But it was just knowing that I needed to put this fly where this silver was sitting away from all these pinks, watching that silver bullet come up and just freaking annihilate that fly. It's super cool.
That's badass.
Yeah.
I know we're doing stories, but have you done any top water action for coho up there?
Not on the river that I normally guide.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit. I haven't personally done any, so I don't know yet. But out west we did, and it was pretty incredible watching 12, 14-pound salmon crushing like a popper almost the size of my fist.
Yeah.
This is pretty insane to watch.
That's pretty dope.
There was this one hole we pulled into, and the wind was blowing upriver, so it was pushing me back into this cove. And we were throwing a popper and a dolly, and we would hook a fish, and then we'd fight it and get it in, and the wind would blow me further into the cove. And as I'm trying to row out, my clients were still casting a popper, and we catch a fish, and it'd blow us back in and net it, and then I'd row us out, and we took another fish. I eventually like, guys, put your rods down, we gotta go.
Yeah, we're gonna be out here, and it's gonna be, well, I guess it's summertime, so it's not gonna get like.
Well, this was the end of August in Western Alaska, so it got dark and it got shady.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you're right on the Bering Sea, so it gets cold.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm gonna take my story on a little throwback to Montana this early fall. We're fishing a well-known river and called the Madison River. And we're coming down, and we're in a drift boat, and the river kind of kicks out, and there's this little, like, it's almost like a little side pocket, and there's a down tree that comes down it. And that day we were swinging streamers, and so as we're floating by it, I was head hunting for a big brown. That was my goal of the entire trip. I was like, I want a brown that I can, like, get that nice trophy brown looking fish. And so I was working hard. It was probably like hour or two in. I caught a rainbow and some other smaller fish, and then I hit this log, and I'm like, ooh, that looks juicy. The seam rolls in, hits the side of the log, and then how sometimes on the side of logs they get that nice soft seam that looks like it's just bouncing off the log. Mm-hmm. And so as we float by it, I cast kind of behind us, and I just pop it right into that, like right where the water collides into that, into the log, and I give it a couple strips, and I just let it go tight, and it just swings that log like all the way down it. And as I'm coming off the end of the log, it just smacks this big old streamer, just hits it like a freaking freight train. And we fought this fish probably about a couple minutes, and then I got a nice photo with it, and it was like a butter brown, like that kind of gold brown. They're beautiful. And it actually ended up not being my biggest fish of the trip, but one of my most, memorable ones that I won't forget. And a little shout out to everyone that's out there working hard with everything going on the Madison, sending some prayers your way. That's a tough season for that fishery this year. So thanks for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, dude, that's sick. That's a sick story.
Yeah, I know that was some good. That's a good way to end a podcast. So
Heck yeah. Let's not end it on on the sad note though. What's going on in the Madison? We'll pick that up on the next episode of Just
yep,
You.
yep, perfect.
Well, all right, guys. Appreciate you listening to Keaton and I ramble. I think
Yeah,
we had honestly, Keaton and I would have had the same conversation whether we recorded or not. So
yeah.
decided to record. We hope you guys can pull something out of it. Uh Signing off, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Keaton.
Catch you on the next one.
Thanks.
Deuces.